Hello and welcome to the round so far, brought to you by AAMI. I'm Riley Beveridge. This is Kane Cornes. Kane, plenty to get to today. We'll start at the MCG, where Jack Ginnivan came back to haunt his old side. He was fantastic as Hawthorn beat Collingwood by 11 goals.
What a story this is, and this is the big story. Career best game from this man. There was Argy Bargy, he was in the face of Lipinski, and then Maynard had a crack, but it did not deter him against his old side. It was unbelievable. There's his numbers on the screen. 31, 11 score involvements. He was tackling, he was kicking goals, he was celebrating, he was giving it to the crowd. Everything you'd expect from a showman. And he's going to sell a lot of Guernseys at Hawthorn. It was interesting to see the Collingwood fans boo him. I can understand why, but it was the same Collingwood fans that used to complain about other teams booing him, so there's some irony in that. But it just goes to show the freedom that he's been afforded to play with at Hawthorn. Career high 30 disposals. His previous best was 23. That was also at Hawthorn, and he only did 20 plus once at Collingwood. They pigeonholed him to a deep forward. Sam Mitchell's got a hold of him and made him twice as good a footballer.
It's a pretty crazy trade now when you look back at it. The basis of that trade was swapping future second-round picks, but Hawthorn are now ahead of Collingwood on the ladder, so they've upgraded their picks as well as getting Jack Ginnivan. Another small forward that Hawthorn brought into the football club last year was Nick the Wizard Watson. We said a couple of weeks ago that the goals would come for the Wizard. Well, they came today.
Yeah, we said it last week, and when the inaccuracy was there, don't worry about it because he does everything well. He's a magnificent field kick, and when you see the work rate, which we're highlighting here, look at this, up the ground. That was the first goal that we saw. Now, this is the reverse angle of it from behind the goals. The work rate was extraordinary, so he's a really good tackler. Today, he was able to finish his work and get the rewards because of that work rate. So his best game at the level, absolutely. This is the one I loved. This was his first goal. Look at the work rate here. And look at the attitude of digging in and never giving up. So this is the role of the small forward. You get up the ground to defend, you sprint back when your team gets it. You may not get it on the first try there, but then you go again and you keep moving, you keep showing up to the front of the contest, and then you win it and you go back and kick a goal. So I just thought it was brilliant. It was a coming-of-age performance. This young Hawthorn team, they love the big stage. Now, as I said, they've been shafted by the AFL with their fixture. Put them on more prime-time games like today, Saturday twilight, against a good opposition, and they show up and they never disappoint.
They were certainly fantastic, and they beat up Collingwood around the stoppage as well. They did everything right. So they were +5 for clearance, +29 for contested possessions. They've won 7 of their last 8 games.
Yeah, they're flying, and they just bullied Collingwood, which is amazing when you think about it. Absolutely bullied them. They won ground balls by 37, would you believe, which is an absolute smashing. They broke tackles, like Will Day there, just taking the mickey. They just burst through tackles. I mean, that stuff there was kind of embarrassing from senior players from Collingwood who just looked like they did not want to be there. They looked old. They looked like they were out-coached. Perhaps Sam Mitchell out-foxed Craig McRae with the Finn McGuinness sub thing when they thought he was going to tag Nick Dacos, but this was a really embarrassing performance from Collingwood. On the flip side, it was a statement from Hawthorn to say that they're probably the second or third best team in it right now. And if they show up and they qualify for finals, you would not want to be getting them.
You certainly wouldn't. Collingwood had 14 players with 10 disposals or less. They've also lost 4 games in a row for the first time under Craig McRae, which brings us to this, Kane. This is the last few premiers. The record of backing up a year later isn't great. So Geelong, we know they won the flag in 2022. 23, they finished 12th. Collingwood, they're going under the same sort of thing at the moment. 13th on the ladder, they're in serious danger of missing the finals.
Yeah, I mean, you need the motivation. And when you reach the pinnacle like they did, it is hard to show up for the following year and have the motivation when you've done it. That's why these Richmond teams are unbelievable. That's why Hawthorn prior to them, that's why Geelong in the same sort of era were unbelievable, because it is hard. And we've seen that from Geelong. We saw it when Richmond won their third, but you can excuse them for that. And we just goes to show how even it is. And Collingwood do not look like it at the moment. They've lost 4 in a row, which is the most under Craig McRae, and they're in all sorts of trouble season over.
One team that's not in all sorts of trouble is the Western Bulldogs. Let's get to GMHBA Stadium now, because they upset Geelong, and it was their work forward of centre. It was interesting that the Cats withdrew Shannon Neal on the eve of this game because of the rain at GMHBA Stadium. It was pouring with rain. Bulldogs went with the 3 tall forwards. Hugo Hagan kicked 4 goals, Norton 2 goals, and Darcy 1 goal plus 11 tackles.
Yeah, so 15 to 4 marks inside forward 50 in these conditions. So you'd have to say they got it right. Perhaps Geelong was spooked with their selection by the conditions, and you can understand that. The Bulldogs went the other way, but just, geez, they provided a contest, didn't they? They're tall forwards. I love their forward line. I think they're absolutely stacked. Waitman's been so important. 14 again today and just gets involved in everything. But that's the man I want to talk about, because we said last week, started slowly, and it was a coming-of-age performance. And I thought, well, can he do it against another good opposition, not under a roof, in tough conditions? And didn't he answer some questions there? I mean, what are 2 weeks that he has put together? What are 2 weeks that the Western Bulldogs side has? It's criminal that they're outside the 8 with the list that they have got. So full credit to them on what they've done the last 2 weeks. It is absolutely criminal. They're not sitting inside the top 2 and genuinely challenging for a premiership with a list that they've got. It is stacked. So 2 straight wins over top 4 sides, with Sydney at the SCG next week. One man who's had a fantastic season is Adam Treloar. He was great again tonight. 31 disposals, 3 goals to go with 6 clearances and 8 tackles. He's been in the All-Australian squad 3 times across his career, Adam Treloar. He's never made the final team. I reckon he'd go close this year, though. Big numbers. I think he's been criticised, and probably rightly so, for huge numbers in the past, but minimal damage. Now he's getting big numbers with maximum damage, and you can see where he's winning the football. So to kick the 3 goals, high score involvements again, and what a foil he's been for Marcus Bontempelli this year. So him and Richards are just having enormous years, and I reckon you need 3 genuinely, B plus A grade midfielders to win it. And the Western Bulldogs have got that. They've found Richards. Treloar's having a career best year at into his 30s, and Bontempelli is Bontempelli. So they can absolutely go up next to Sydney, and if they meet them in the final, and be confident. The Cats are stuttering at GMHBA Stadium. Tonight was their 3rd loss in their last 5 games at their home deck. We went through a generation where they just didn't lose down here, and now all of a sudden teams are really challenging him when they play at GMHBA Stadium. You still look at it, the fixture, and you go, okay, well, they've got 9 at GMHBA. There's 8 wins, maybe 9, but not now. I mean, Port Adelaide absolutely destroyed them. The Giants just held on there, but then, what the Western Bulldogs did today, that was Chris Scott's biggest loss at that ground. So the aura is gone. They were terrific against. I just can't get a read on Geelong. Maybe with their age, they can get themselves up for 1 or 2 weeks, but when that load builds up on them, it is too much. And when you come up against a young, powerful side with lots of weapons in it, they were just they're beaten far too easily today. It's been an interesting month for them. They lost to Carlton by 10 goals, and they came out and beat Essendon and Collingwood, and then they produced what they did tonight against the Western Bulldogs. Let's get to the Adelaide Oval now, where Port Adelaide defeated Richmond on the back of Charlie Dixon going forward and rewinding the clock a little bit. He'd kicked 1 goal in 4 games prior to tonight, but he kicked 4 goals. He was the difference in this game. A pretty tight game against the Tigers. Yeah, I mean, he's only probably playing because they got some injuries. Todd Marshall and Finlayson and Dixon off that report. They were forced to play him last week because Georgiades was reported, and he looked horrible, and he has looked horrible, and he's moved horrible, and he's clearly coming to the end. But tonight he winds back the clock and takes 5 marks inside forward 50, 5 of those contested, and kicks the 4 goals. So he really broke it open. Port Adelaide kicked 4 goals, 8 in the last quarter to 1 point. I mean, it was the scoring shots, plus 16 for scoring shots. They smashed them in every key metric. Don't think they're going that well, Port Adelaide, but clearly they were always going to be far too good for this depleted Richmond side. And one sign that suggests they're perhaps not going so well is just how many goals they conceded from the back half. So 6 goals from the defensive half. Richmond has kept opening them up. We've spoken about this with Port Adelaide before, where you can beat them over the back. Yeah, this is my concern about this game and about every game that Port Adelaide have lost. This is usually a theme for it. So their defenders come up so high, and it's great when you can lock the ball inside your forward half, which they did at times, but when you get through and basically you score. Now, this is a side that's on the bottom of the ladder, kicking 6 goals from their back half because Port Adelaide's defenders press when they don't need to press, and I think Radagalia and Alia play far too high. Zerk Thatchen's been enormous, and he was terrific again tonight, but I think they've just got to hold that defensive unit just a fraction deeper. Otherwise, they're too easy to score against. One team that was certainly easy to score against today was Gold Coast. They lost to the Giants, who, again, scored so many goals from their defensive half. So they kicked 8 goals to 2 from their back half. It was a weird game statistically because the Suns were plus 19 for inside 50s. They kicked 6-14 from 66 entries. Yeah, but this is the vision that would be disappointing because this is not on fast play. A lot of these are on slow play. And you can see the numbers there to the right. But have a look at this. The work rate, that's Bedford there, just going. The lack of defensive anything from Gold Coast today was alarming, particularly because Damien Hardwick really put it on this group. When they lost against North Melbourne a couple of weeks ago, they responded well, but that's at home. This group only likes sleeping in their own bed.
Yeah.
They hate getting on planes. They should pack their own pillow because they just cannot stand getting on a plane. And the attitude that they turned up with today, he's a star, Darcy Jones. You spoke about him months ago, but look at that. That's just far too easy. Just a genuine lack of resistance today from a Gold Coast Suns group that is mentally fragile. Yeah, there's only one way you can describe that. They do not like when they are taken outside of their comfort zone.
They're now 9-0 at home and 0-9 away from home. Speaking about the mental side of the game, Ben King got the yips today because he'd kicked 44-16 before today. He had 7 shots from 8 disposals, but he kicked 3 behinds and 4 that missed completely.
Must be said, it was really windy conditions, and that clearly played on his mind right from the start. But all of these, even in windy conditions, didn't really bother the Giants. They were pretty accurate, the Giants. You can see there, 6-1 at that stage of the game, and then Ben King kept showing up.
These are all the crucial moments as well.
Crucial moments and very gettable shots. Like, that's genuinely 15 metres out, basically directly in front, and didn't look like it. So, I mean, he has had a really solid year. He's been accurate in front of goal, as you said, but today it just got a bit too much for him. All
right, let's get to our moment of the weekend now, and it was Toby doing Toby things. He hasn't had his best year, but he can still produce when the time comes. And have a look at this one. Another goal is over his head. I reckon he's done this a couple of times through his career.
He's just really clever. I think he's one of the best in the phone box. So only needs one step to be able to have a crack and get a shot at goal. Now, Will Powell had the matchup on him. He's a genuine star, Will Powell. I think he's got to be a future midfielder, but today he put his hand up to take on Toby, and it was just the 2 goals he kicked. One, he balked about 3 people and kicked a check side, and then that one over his head. But the thing about today's performance was they weren't reliant on him. And in a lot of their wins this year, unlike last year, they haven't been relying on the skipper, but he played his part, but I thought he was beaten today.
Let's get to Marvel Stadium now. Friday night footy where Adelaide defeated Essendon in a game full of momentum swings. So Adelaide kicked 8 straight goals at one point. Essendon then answered with 7 straight goals. This was summed up by the fact that Adelaide kicked 4 of the last 5 goals to win the game.
Yeah, it's amazing, wasn't it? Amazing, the momentum swings. That barrier, that's the 7th goal I think Adelaide had kicked in a row. In fact, it might have been the 8th goal that they'd kicked in a row, and then the Bombers respond through their 7th goal in a row, and Cox, and he drifted down off the wing and kicked his 3rd. He was really important, Harry Jones, so they went taller on the wings, and it just looked as though Essendon were able to get that momentum back. And there's the Gresham goal. You can see the time to put them with a really handy lead in that moment. But they did make a few errors, which we'll get to, and we'll replay that one there from Kelly. But that's Rochelle kicking the winner, and he loved it. He loves the celebration. And Adelaide caused an upset that certainly I didn't see coming.
And it could have huge finals implications, particularly for Essendon. Let's take a look at the behind the goals in the later stages of the game, because there was a couple of moments that were interesting, Kane.
Yeah, so this is Langford going behind the ball. So this is the way that it should work. And we know that he can do it because he's played this role before. So he comes down, gets the instruction, takes the intercept mark straight away, goes to the perfect spot. That is how you draw it up. That's how it works. This is not. So Kelly, he sees his man go into the stoppage. I probably don't need to go in there. I'm going to drop back, which is the right thing to do. But he gets lost. You don't want to be in no man's land. You want to be a kick away in that position. It's only a couple of metres the ball goes over his head because he was just a fraction too slow to react and get into a dangerous spot. And that caused the goal. And then this is the last centre bounce where Essendon set up all to the right. You can see their forwards there, the 6, 6 and 6. And then Martin streams out of the centre bounce. He got to hit that kick there. Right bang there. That's what Zach Merritt would hit. That's what the best midfielders, Bontempelli, Zach Butters would hit that. He chose the wrong option, and Essendon coughed up a gold-clad opportunity to wrestle back the lead late.
Surprised because Zach Merritt, you'd back him 10 times out of 10 to hit that kick to Nick Martin spotting up there. Ben Keays, he was fantastic. He's been such a find for them since he came over from Brisbane. He did it again on Friday night. Kicked 5 goals to go with 22 disposals. Plus, he set up that match-winning moment for Josh Rochelle.
Yeah, he's enormous. I just love his work rate. I think he's a really important player for them. The leadership that he's shown this year, and he just wills himself to the contest. But look, he doesn't look like the most polished player, but that's unkind because he is now. Like, he's been able to have real touch around goal, as we're seeing. He's turned himself into a very reliable set shot, and then there's some brilliance involved as well, but that's just through pure determination and work rate, and he wanted it more. And the thing I loved about it was Matty Nicks sort of sensed it and sensed he was hot, and in key moments put him on ball, gave him centre bounce exposure that perhaps he hasn't had for a couple of seasons at Adelaide since he crossed, and he was a genuine midfielder, but he was the best player on the ground by an absolute mile.
We've spoken about Essendon a lot this season and whether or not they're reliable, but when you're 4 goals up with about 5 minutes to go and you've got this much experience on the field, so they only had 3 players that had played fewer than 50 games last night. They were on average 42 games per player more experienced than Adelaide, almost 2 years older than them per player as well. They shouldn't have been losing that game from where they were.
It's a disaster of a performance. So if you're serious and you're serious about winning a final, which I think they are good enough to do, you just beat Adelaide, who had some injury concerns during the night as well. Murray and Butts went off, and you've just got to absolutely win that. And their drop off, how many times have we spoken in the last 5 years about their defensive system? And then we're sitting here going, okay, how good's this? They finally fixed this. They've gone overseas. They've got themselves fit. They've got a really demanding coach. They've fixed it. But once again, we're talking about them being 15th from rounds 12 to 19 in points against. So the defensive issues have reared their ugly head again.
All right, let's stay at Marvel Stadium. Saturday afternoon footy where St Kilda easily thrashed West Coast. That's where we find our Saturday star, Tim Membry, a career-high 23 disposals, 10 marks, 5 goals. He set up this victory for the Saints. He's going to be a really interesting one at the end of the year, I think. He's a free agent because of the fact he was delisted from Sydney about 10 years ago. He's only 30. A couple of clubs registered their interest last year. Still had a contract with the Saints.
Want him. Absolutely. If someone wants Jack Gunston at his stage, now not saying he's got the same resume as Gunston, but he's younger and he's probably got more physical advantages than what Gunston has got at this stage. But very unusual to have a career best game at the age of 30. And that's exactly what he did. He'd only laid 18 tackles for the year from his 13 games. He laid 7 today. So he was hungry. It was against a depleted and shocking West Coast side, and everyone is kicking goals against West Coast, but you can only do what you can do. I thought he was really impressive today and the best player on the ground.
Let's get to West Coast now, because their co-captain, Oscar Allen, was asked on 6PR radio after the game whether or not the players hurt enough.
You are hurting, but I challenge you there. I think there's a lot of your teammates that are not hurting, and there's a lack of care on their performance.
Yeah, I think everyone hurts differently, but you're right. I feel footy's a game which is completely between the ears, and it's based around your contest and your will to impact the game. And if you're unwilling to do that, it clearly shows up. And if you really don't want to hurt after a game because you walk off with your mates having a great win, you're probably doing everything you can in every moment to stop that from happening.
So I took that as Oscar Allen suggesting that his teammates weren't hurting enough after a performance like that. I think that's summed up in the numbers. So St Kilda had 53 more disposals, but they still laid 21 more tackles. They had 23 tackles inside 50. West Coast didn't lay a single tackle inside 50. So when you've got a team that's won only 8 of their last 67 games, you've already had Dean Cox, Sydney assistant, come out this week and say he doesn't want to be their next coach. They've just parted with Adam Simpson. They've got Jared Schofield in there as an assistant. I think this is seriously worrying times for the Eagles.
Just now, you're just working that out? You just started to get worried?
I think if they're never going to have a reality check after that, then what is going to be the turning point?
New coach, you'd surely get the new coach bounce, which they sort of got a little bit last week. That lasted a week. Yep, there were some key players out and some crucial players that didn't play, but there's been far too many Eagles players that have been comfortable for 3 years. So I'm not surprised at all. And Oscar Allen shouldn't be surprised that, of course, his teammates don't care. Of course, standards have slipped. Of course, they've become an absolute embarrassment and have been for 3 years. So it was a good question from Glenn, but not a surprising answer from me.
Liam Henry of the Saints hobbling off with a knee injury in this one. So fingers crossed for his scan results on Sunday. All right, let's get to the ladder now. It's looking interesting at the top. The Swans still clear there, but then the logjam after that. We were commenting tonight, we can't believe that Port Adelaide's only a percentage off the top 2 spot at the moment.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a commanding 4th position, I don't think. Port Adelaide, not convincing at all. A great opportunity for Brisbane at home against the best team in it to really launch themselves up the ladder. And then the Melbourne and Fremantle game is fascinating as well, because you can see the D's have slipped to 10th and Hawthorn are coming hard.
You really want Hawthorn to nick a spot in the 8, because they would be a serious threat in September. The rest of the round now, it starts with that crucial game. Brisbane against Sydney in the early fixture. Fremantle then host Melbourne in another game with top 8 consequences. at Optus Stadium, then Carlton and North Melbourne to finish it off. That Brisbane-Sydney game, 1:10 at the Gabba on a Sunday, gives me vibes of the early 2000s when they used to play a lot of fixtures in that 1:10 game in the Gabba on a Sunday.
Hard to beat at the Gabba during the daytime, apparently.
Yeah.
I think they've won 21 in a row during the day at the Gabba, but I still think Sydney, the best team in it, will be too good.
A couple of big games on Sunday. Thank you for your time, Kane. Thanks for watching. See you next week.
For the best and most comprehensive wrap of each round, Access All Areas is the show for you. Unpacking all the action and dissecting the big news from each round. Access All Areas thanks to Crypto.com, Mondays on AFL.com.au and the AFL Live app.